very real tonight and speak about a little bit of my story. And I wanted to talk about the time when I was actually the most scared in my life. So one morning when I was 16, doing the school thing, set my alarm, get up, go to walk across the room, and I can't really move. And I'm really out of breath, and I have to sit down halfway across my bedroom. And basically this exhaustion went on for 6 weeks, and it was 6 weeks of being off school and not really being able to do anything for myself, and I couldn't even walk across the room without being out of breath. So you can imagine how scared I was. I was like, what's happening to my body? So me all the time, I'm praying, I'm asking God for healing. I start even asking for things to show up on the test, because I just don't know what's wrong, and you start praying for all these things that you're just let something show up, and nothing was showing up. So it was just 6 weeks is a long time to be feeling like you can't actually move, So I finally get to this doctor, and he diagnoses me with a thing called ME, which is also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm just going to quickly read out this definition that I looked up yesterday. And it said, ME is a long-term neurological condition that causes symptoms affecting the nervous and immune systems. People with ME experience debilitating pain, fatigue, and a range of other symptoms associated with post-exertional malaise, the body and brain's inability to recover after expending even small amounts of energy. So I'm sitting in this doctor's room what? Terrified, and my mum's weeping beside me, and the doctor's you shouldn't do your exams, you shouldn't go back to school, because you just don't know what that pressure will do to your body. So my whole world just seemed to be consumed with this fear of what my future now seemed to look like. So my mum and I left this room, and we walked back to the car, her kind of half carrying me because I still can't really walk. And we get in the car, and we're about to drive back to what I now think is what my life is going to be, just the same way. And as I'm going through all of this, I'm obviously reading the word and trying to pick up on something that I can hold on to. And you can read this later, but it's in 1 Samuel 23, 1-5. And it's David, and he's asking God, should I go and fight these Philistines? So basically, he's asking God what to do next about the fear that's in front of him. So he actually asks him twice. So the first time David asks what to do, God tells him to go and fight them. So he's okay. And then the second time, because his men start kind of building the fear, and they're no, but look at these guys, they're huge, we will never win. So David just quickly checks, and he goes back to God again, and he said, and God gave him an instruction like he did the first time, but he also gave him a promise of deliverance this time. So I'm sitting in that car with my mom, and we haven't even left the car park, and I literally just go like this. I'm just God, please, you have to do something. I want to go to school again. I want to sit my exams. I want to go to college. I want to live this life that I know I'm supposed to live. And whenever I'd finish saying this in my head, I can't even describe what happened in that car. But my mum's head just whips around, and she looks at me, this is true, I'm not lying. She looks at me with this intensity in her eyes that I've never seen before. And she starts saying these words with this strength in her voice that I've never heard, never. And she wipes away her tears, and she wipes away mine, and she says these words: no, this is not going to be your life. This is not you, and it is not what's in the plans for my daughter. We are going to start slow, but we're going to get you better. And we're going to start you walking across the living room until you can do it. And then we're going to move to the hall. And then we're going to take the stairs, and then you're going to go outside, and you're going to go back to school, and you're going to live the life that you were made to live. So this is my mother, who she knows who God is but doesn't have a personal relationship with him. But that was God speaking through my mother that day. That was the Lord's eyes and the Lord's voice through my mom. And he was just saying, this is not what I have for my daughter. And that's what we did. We started out slow. We took that instruction and we walked across the hall, and I sat my exams, and last year I graduated a degree, you know, like, but like every ounce of glory goes back to God, because, you know, that was not me. I have no idea how that happened. But like, what if I'd listened to the doctor and not just went back one more time in prayer? You know, what if David hadn't asked that second time? He wouldn't have got that promise of deliverance. So I'm not saying it's easy, you know, like, we all have these huge fears, and that's only one of them in my life. You have your own, like, whatever it is. Maybe it's the fear of surrendering your fear. Like, whatever that is, just be encouraged to go back again and just to give it to God. And just look what he can do, you know, in you and through you, when you just give it up to him and give that fear back to him. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Feel the fear, do it anyway. Fear, it's so complicated. It either paralyzes us or it motivates us. Many fears, they're often born from a desire to control the outcome, rather than trusting in obedience to God. There were these people called the Israelites, and they were under the rule and reign of the Midianites. And the people of Israel, they were robbed and impoverished under these guys' hands. And they were desperate, and they cried out to the Lord for help. And God, he heard their cry, and he sent an angel of the Lord to this guy called Gideon. All right? And Gideon, at the time, he was, I forget this word, it's hard. He was threshing wheat. You can all look that up later. He was threshing wheat, but he was doing it in a place that was like far from public view. So effectively, he was hiding. And the angel said to Gideon, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." In some translations, it says mighty hero. So he's a hero before he's even done anything. And Gideon replies, "Pardon me, my Lord?" He says, "Pardon me?" He says, "If the Lord is with us, then why has all of this happened to us? Where are all his magnificent wonders that we hear about our ancestors telling us? He's given us to the hand of the Midian, and he's abandoned us." He definitely didn't have a South County Dublin accent, okay? Just picture, we're in Palestine, all right? But the Lord said, "Listen, Gideon, go in the strength that you have and save Israel from the hand of the Midianites." And again, can you imagine being this sassy to the Lord of the universe? Again, Gideon, he's like, "Pardon me, Lord?" He says, "How can I save Israel? I come from the weakest family in this land, and I'm the least in my family. Look at them and look at how irrelevant I am." And the Lord says, "I will be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites, leaving none alive." And Gideon says, all right, if I found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it's really you." And here follows a series of Gideon checking that it was really an angel of the Lord. He double checks, he triple checks that God hadn't gotten him mixed up with someone else. And he puts God through a bizarre set of tests to make sure that he's not going crazy. And throughout his battle, Gideon's journey, it's filled with highs and lows, times of confusion and times of blind faith. And he continues to check with God. You sure you meant me? Are you sure I'm doing the right thing? God's like, "Yes, I know what I'm doing." But Gideon felt utterly unfitted. He felt unworthy, and he felt unready. But to answer God's call, it demands a courageous faith. I wonder what he's calling you to. But Gideon went on to complete amazing things in the Lord's name. He faced a society that rejected God, that worshipped idols, and that placed importance on the futile. I wonder if that sounds familiar. But the odds were so often stacked against Gideon, and yet he did it anyway. He recognized God's sovereign promise. And God reminded him of his peace that he abundantly pours on us every day. You know, it was Mandela who said that courage, it isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And that the brave man, it isn't the man who doesn't feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Because you see, fear limits us, and it blinds us, and it lies to us, and it's often an illusion. And fear, it keeps us regretting the past and worried about the future. And I wonder if you too readily accept that fear. I wonder if you almost seek the next thing to be fearful of, your future, your relationship or lack thereof, that situation that could occur, that thing that may happen, the prospect of that possible outcome. But here's what you need to know. God doesn't work in the maybe. He's not interested in ambiguity. He's not in the business of filling your life or filling his people with life-inhibiting fear. He's crystal clear in his promises to us. But the enemy will reject you and fail you and feed you false promises. But Timothy tells us this kind of fear, it's not of God. It doesn't come from our loving Father. He hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and of sound mind. I think that God reminds us over 75 times in the Bible to fear not, because he knows the enemy uses fear to decrease our hope and to limit our victories. So fear, it's inevitable, but what you choose to do with it will shape your life. So be like Gideon, a little sassy at times, but ultimately trusting God endlessly and living in beautiful obedience to his ways, whilst basking in his eternal peace.
Tonight I want to focus on two sort of things, and one of them is the fear of surrender, or the fear of giving in. And I guess the story is, it's based around this man. His name is Naaman. He lives in a place called Aram. So Aram is right beside Israel, and they're kind of enemies, but they kind of get on sometimes. And Naaman is the commander of the armies of Aram. And the word says that he's been given a lot of success, and that the king of Aram sort of sees him as someone who is highly regarded, and he gives a lot of success to Aram. And the word says he is a mighty warrior. And in fact, God even blessed him so much that he gave victory through Naaman to Aram. But there was one little thing, and it says in 2 Kings verse 5, it just says, he was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. And as I was reading this, I couldn't get over that. It lists all his successes, it lists everything he's ever done, and then it just finishes with a line, but he had leprosy, as if everything that he'd ever accomplished, as all the battles he's ever won, just didn't matter anymore, as if people see him now in this light that he has leprosy. And I guess during the day, leprosy was it was sort of seen as a punishment by God. It was seen as hereditary. It was seen as something that was clinging onto you, that you could not get away from, that you cannot shake off. And as I was reading this, I was sort of thinking, maybe, some of us, we might have a list of successes that it might be doing great on the outside, that we might be doing great in life, but then there is a huge nearly but over our identity. There is a huge but over our lives as people. And this could be anything. This could be a mental health illness. It could be a relationship. It could be a family situation. And this but, it steals your identity, and you can't do anything about it yourself. And the story goes on that Naaman, this big commander warrior, he finds out that he can be healed of his leprosy in his neighbor Israel. So he sets off on this big journey across to Israel, and it says that he takes a load of things with him. He starts to take fine linen, he takes gold, and he takes silver. And I calculated it all up, and it came to 2.5 million. So he takes the worth of 2.5 million with him to go and seek a miracle in Israel. And the story goes, he arrives at the door of this prophet in Israel, who he hears can heal him. And he arrives with all his stuff, and he's looking for a healing. He's looking for God to do something in his life. And the prophet doesn't even come to the door to meet him. he sends a servant and says, hey, Naaman, go wash in that river 7 times. And I just wonder sometimes, do we sometimes bring all of this stuff to God? Do we sometimes try and come and bring approval to God and try and lay out all our successes to him and say, God, will you do something? And the reality is that there's only one who has bought your approval in God. His name is Jesus, and he actually paid his whole life for it. The story goes on anyway, and Naaman gets really angry. The prophet doesn't come out to meet him, and he says, I expected this big thing from God. I expected him to come out, wave his hand over my leprosy, and heal me. And Naaman goes off down the road in a big huff. And then, in just one little moment, his servant comes to him and says, and I'll read it here right now. Verse 13 of chapter 5. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? And you see, this is the thing, that these sort of buts that loom over our lives, they've been with us for so long, and it's so hard to shake them, and it's so hard to give into them. And if you can imagine Naaman, all he's been asked to do is wash in a river to be clean, to be rid of his leprosy, to be rid of the things that are plaguing him. And I can imagine him going through it. He's washed so many times. Can you imagine him? He's tried to wash this leprosy already off him. And the reality is that I think God wants to do something tonight in you, that he wants you to just make a simple step tonight to surrender to him. And maybe you've done it before, and maybe it didn't work that time, but this time God is in it. This time God will bring a healing. He'll bring something into your life, and he'll change that butt that has been with you forever if you'll just give in to him. So I guess my question is, why are you afraid of surrender? Why are you afraid of doing something so small for God? Because this butt that seems so big in your life, it's so small for God, and he can remove it in an instant. So surrender to God tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so feel the fear and do it anyway. The most recent example of that in my life is the fact that I'm actually up here, because believe me, the fear is real. But by the grace of God, I'm going to do it anyway. So when I first heard the topic, the first thing that came to my mind was Jesus and how he was the night before he was crucified. So we see in Matthew 26, 36 to 41, that he had the Last Supper with his disciples. Then he left with 3 specific disciples, Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. He went into a garden called Garden of Gethsemane. He went to pray. Jesus was described in the Bible, and every time I read it, it still shocks me because it shows Jesus as so vulnerable. It was described as depressed, as distressed of mind, and Jesus brought his disciples. He actually told them, I'm feeling this way, I'm deeply grieved. This is the Amplified version. And he told them to watch over them and to pray, to watch over him and to pray for him. And he went off and prayed. And also in Luke 22:44, it's interesting that Luke describes Jesus' sweat as almost blood-like. And a friend actually told me last week that there's a super rare medical condition that when someone's actually under so much distress, there's only one case study, kind of medically studied, that it's actually possible when someone's under so much distress. So from what it says in Matthew and what it says in Luke as well, we can assume. It doesn't say Jesus felt the fear. That would have been great for this. For this, like Jesus felt the fear, he did it anyway, great. But we can assume, he felt it. We can assume from how he was described that he was under great distress. So how did Jesus go from feeling the fear to doing it anyway? Because we know he did it, because that's why we're here. That's why we have our salvation. That's why we're Christians. So 3 things stood out to me. The first thing he did was that he sought God. He left the 12 disciples, he left the bigger group, and he went off to pray to God. And that should be our first reaction as Christians. Whenever we feel the fear, whenever we identify the feeling, we should seek God. It's not the most natural reaction, but it should be the first reaction. The second thing he did was he brought support. So he brought Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. He brought people he thought he could trust. Now, if you read further on in the chapter, they kept falling asleep and stuff. But anyway, don't focus on that. He brought the disciples he probably thought he trusted. I'm just saying, like, he didn't bring Judas or anything. So for so we should know that when we do feel the fear, we should have support. We should have godly support. We should have people that we know will pray for us, will watch over us, and will be a listening ear and also a praying mouth. And the third thing he did was surrender. I'm really proud of myself. They all start with S's. Last night I was like, oh my God. Anyway, he surrendered to God. It actually says twice that he said, let your will be done. So he sought God, he prayed, he had support, but most importantly, he surrendered. So if this is how Jesus handled it, if this is how Jesus felt the fear and did it anyway, I think as Christians, it's a good method to use. Because I suppose for me, there is a link between feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Because by my strength, by my will, positive thoughts, all that stuff, I can't make the jump myself. And I think God is a missing link. God is how we feel the fear and do it anyway. And Jesus showed us how. So thank you so much.
Sweet. Lads, weren't they so amazing, weren't they? All right, I'm going to be 5. I'm going to keep it quick. Lads, I'm going to bring you on a trip down memory lane. Who remembers this little tool? Okay? When I think about fear, I think about my mom. I think about her running around the house, looking for me, looking for Lydia, looking for Hannah. And if you don't know, I don't know if it's a universal thing, but basically this wasn't used to taste sauce or to stir the pot or do whatever else. This was used as a weapon by Irish mothers. Now our mum, as I've said it before, but our mum was blind, so this was a tough one for her because she'd be trying to find us. Now listen, people are going to judge us because we used to hide, and literally 3 of us would be like, don't say anything, don't make a noise. We'd be so silent. But who in their right mind wants to get hit with a wooden spoon? Like, so that's what we did. So we used to hide, me, Hannah, and Lydia. Lydia, if she was caught, she used to cry before she was even hit to get out of it. But my mom would say these few words, and it'd get us to run out from under the table, closet, wherever we were. And she'd say, listen, you either take the hit now or wait until your dad gets home, and then he'll get you. And obviously he can't see, so we were screwed there. There was no hiding there. But so yeah, we feared our father, not in a phobia kind of way, or when we saw him, like we ran out of the room, but in a kind of respect, and like we just knew he had a harder hit as well. So I've been reading a lot about fear and the fear of God, so just going to read a few verses here. I know it's a bit of a topic that everyone goes, oh, Janie. But let's just bear with me for a sec. So it says, praise the Lord, how blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments. Another one says, he will bless those who fear the Lord, the small together with the great. Another one says, the fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. And one more, the fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil. So there's a bunch of them, tons of verses. But basically, what does that mean? So obviously there's healthy fear. If a tiger came into this auditorium, I think everyone would be running. You'd be milling over chairs, kicking people out of the way. Bam, that's a healthy fear. But then there's unhealthy fear as well. So there's the fear of clowns, of course. Does anyone have the fear of clowns? Simple hand up in the room? No? I found this one. It's called electorophobia. It's a fear of chickens. There's tons of mad ones. There's Amy Chopo, I can't even pronounce it. It's the fear of being scratched, or the fear of scratching. There's tons of them. But the fear of God isn't like that. The fear of God is basically, when we have the fear of God, it puts us in awe of God. So we can see him for who he truly is, and it actually puts us in the place where we go, okay, my situation isn't big in comparison to a big God that's covering the whole thing. So Philippians 4 verse 6 to 7, it says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So, fear of God leaves you in awe and keeps your path straight. It also makes him bigger than what's going on in your life. In comparison to that, then, the fear of man makes God small and makes man big. It seeks to intimidate you, and as Jenny was saying, it seeks to paralyze you and to keep you back from what God has in store for you. It wants to take the plans away that he has for your life, and wants to keep you boxed in and afraid and, not willing to step out and whatever else. So when I feared my dad, it was a fear of respect. I didn't want to let him down, and I wanted to do what was right in his eyes as well. So I had something here. I wrote that down just when I was praying there. Basically, I was just thinking, it's something so small, but I just felt God dropped it into my heart. Does anyone remember when someone would say something to you and you'd be a bit afraid, and your initial reaction would be to do you know what, my dad take you. My dad take you. My dad's stronger than you. My dad's stronger than your dad. My dad's better at football than your dad. And it was kind of like that place that we could hide behind our Father. And when we fear God, our world could be falling to bits. Just bear with me. When we fear God, our world could be falling to bits. We won't fear tomorrow. We won't fear our finances. We won't fear that relationship, that future, whatever it is. I don't know. Fears are real, people. And I know, we all fear. Even you're in work and you're like, Janie, I really want to share with someone. I have something for that person, and there's something that's just holding us back, or it's that feeling of, will I be approved? Will they keep me in the friend group? Will they judge me? Will it be seen as I'm judging them? Or I don't know, you might be struggling with anxiety issues, or you might be at home and you don't want to leave your house, and this is real. We know people that are literally afraid to leave their houses because they're just overcome with such a darkness in them. And lads, God has so much. He has freedom for your life. He died on the cross for us, they're saying there today. And, oh man, it's just Jesus' freedom. It's like no other thing. It's like no other thing. And literally, there's so many things in our lives that just hold us back from stepping into the plans that he has for us. And when we go, listen, God, you're bigger than those fears. You're bigger than all of that. You're bigger than that bank account that I have no money in. You're bigger than that job opportunity that I don't think I can get. You're bigger than that family issue. You're bigger than that sickness. You're bigger than that health issue. That's when we're giving God room to work, because we restrict what God can do with our lack of faith. But when we say, God, you're bigger than that. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know what's going on. I can't do it in my own strength, but you can. That's when we're giving God room to move, and that's what we're us allowing him to move in us. So can everyone just stand up in the room? We don't just throw this for kicks. We know that people have real fear, and we all struggle with fear, and we all have doubts, and we all struggle. And today we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to submit fears to God. And let's just see things actually happen in our lives. Let's see transformations, people be set free. And I want to hear stories next week of going, do you know what, I was struggling with that last week. This week I'm a changed person. This week it's a new thing. It's a new day. His mercies are new every morning.